Good afternoon and welcome to you wherever you're social distancing, and welcome to this TARGETjobs webinar on how to fill the 2020 CV gap, probably the biggest question that we're going to be asking this year and probably most of next year. I'm joined today by, we've got a panel of recruiters here who are here to talk to you. I'm going to introduce them in just a second, but I just want to go over a couple of ground rules. If you don't mind, and if you want to ask questions at any time, please do feel free to type them into the questions pane. If you see a question that you want answered, please upvote it so that it moves to the top of the list and we are more likely to get to it when we reach the time for questions at the end. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and I'm going to go, and I apologize because I know this is always different on different people's screens. I'm going to go clockwise as it looks for me. So I'm going to start with Jamie Wharf, who is University Engagement for Enterprise. Perhaps if you could just tell us a little bit about what Enterprise does and what your role is.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, my name is Jamie Wharf. Hello to everybody from this crazy virtual world that we've found ourselves in. So Enterprise Holdings is a holding organisation which has several brands that sit within it. Enterprise Rent-A-Car is a more commonly known brand in the UK, and that's where predominantly the majority of our opportunities sit. So you've got a graduate management training scheme which you start on and progress and work through the sort of scheme, and then after 12 months you sit an internal exam, and that then opens up the sort of gateway and path to management and leadership roles. I've worked for Enterprise for 17 years. I have the privilege of working all over the UK in lots of different capacities, and currently find myself now in the capacity of engaging with wonderful students such as yourselves. So we recruit from a variety of backgrounds, and we have no sort of preference on where people come from, as long as they've got a university degree and are really keen to move their careers forward and end up in a leadership role.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And I'm going to ask Neve Fitzgerald, who is Graduate Recruitment Advisor at Atkins, to tell us a little bit more about Atkins.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Neve Fitzgerald. I'm a graduate recruitment advisor at Atkins. We have a number of early careers programs which cover apprenticeships, placements, or what you might know as an internship, and then of course graduate schemes. So with Atkins, we're one of the world's most respected design, engineering and project management consultancies. So that means we help plan, design and enable major capital projects, and we provide consultancy, engineering and design services to cover, the full life cycle across a lot of different business areas. So we have transportation, nuclear power, resources, defence, aerospace, infrastructure. We also have a part of our business known as Faithful and Gould, which is more so project management and surveying, quantity surveying. So at Atkins, I always say to people, depending on what you want from your career, we might not be the ideal fit for you, but you could be the ideal fit for us. There's no point in having 100 civil engineers running a company, you'd get nothing done. So diversity of thought is really important at Atkins. So although there are a number of technical roles which do require that technical background, be it civil engineering, chemical engineering, we also have a broader kind of pool of disciplines that we look for. So hopefully there's something there for everybody.
Thank you very much, Neve. And I'm last but certainly not least, Sarah Scadding, who is campus recruiter for Deutsche Bank. If you could perhaps tell us a little bit about Deutsche Bank.
Yes, hello. Hi, everybody. Delighted to be here today. As Matt mentioned, I work for Deutsche Bank. So I'm on their early careers recruitment team. I have been at Deutsche Bank 12 weeks, which means I have been onboarded virtually, but really enjoying myself, and kind of worked in early careers for about 9 years at various organisations. Deutsche Bank for me is particularly exciting because I think the team are particularly innovative and open to new ideas. But in terms of kind of early careers opportunities, we have lots. So we have lots of first year opportunities. We have opportunities if you're in your penultimate year, and also if you're in your final year of study as well. And that crosses kind of all areas of the bank. So Deutsche Bank, if you don't know, it's a German kind of investment bank and financial services company. Globally, I think there's about 78,000 of us. which is quite a lot. But I think with that comes great opportunity to kind of move within the bank. And very excitingly, we have just launched 2 new first year programs today. They've gone live today. So we have our Spring into Banking, which is our tech and our finance streams, but we've also launched 2 diversity programs. So a Rise and Grow program aimed at first year females and the other one aimed at first year Black heritage students as well. So lots of different opportunities if you're interested in Deutsche Bank.
And thank you much to all 3 of you for joining us today. And we just for those of you who are out there watching, we've got a fantastic range of experience here from a fantastic range of sectors as well. So hopefully what we come up with will be applicable to you, whatever you're considering, given the reach that we have today. So I think the first, we've got a few talking points that we want to go through that hopefully will help you and maybe sort of answer some of your questions even before they get asked. So the first one I think we want to start with is what is the first thing, and I'm asking our recruiters here, what should we say to students who are worried about the 2020 CV gap, as we're referring to it? And that's essentially anything, from March when we had the first lockdown, we're now in another lockdown, and there's probably been a bit of time in between where there hasn't really been much of an opportunity to do anything. And I'm gonna stick to the same format. I'm gonna go clockwise. So I'm gonna start with Jamie this time, and then I think we'll go back the other way afterwards. So Jamie, what's the first thing you would say to students who are worried about their 2020 CV gap?
I think the first thing to remember is we've all been in the same boat with this COVID situation, and it's not necessarily the lack, or the lack of things to enter into a CV or enter into a conversation about. It's about how you explain what you've been doing with your time, and how you articulate that. And I think it's really important to remember that prior to the COVID pandemic, all of us, myself included, were getting on with our lives as normal. And that's sort of like gap or pause, if you like. And it's quite apt because obviously we're on a 2020 CV gap webinar. It's almost like you need to acknowledge the fact that we've been in this situation. I think it's important to explain what you've been doing, how you've been dealing with it, maybe what you've learned through the experience of being in lockdown. And when you actually think about what you've actually learned and done, if you actually think about it, you probably learned a lot about yourself. You probably learned a lot about different industries. You're probably a little bit more aware of maybe your personal brand because you've had more time to think about it. So just think about those things. What can you take forward and talk about? And I think, and again, it really emphasises for me when I talk to our recruitment team, and what people are coming forward with during interviews is they're talking very passionately and in depth about the things they were doing prior to the lockdown, and then focus on those sort of self-development pieces that they maybe have been working on while they've been stuck at home. And out of this sort of social spectrum or the work spectrum or the education spectrum.
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Jamie. I mean, as you say, there is. I think it's perhaps the way that it feels while we're in lockdown. There is a tendency to feel quite sort of negative about it. You're told you can't go shopping, you can't go to pubs and bars or whatever it is. But that actually, that you were doing a lot of things before, and you've probably been reading a lot of things while you've been in lockdown, and it's all there. It's just being able to articulate it and make use of it when you come to the kind of application processes. Neve, how about you? What would be the first thing that you say to anyone worried about the CV gap at the moment?
Sure. I mean, I think it's so important to remember that this is a shared experience. It has been a global pandemic. And although some of us are maybe in a position of privilege where we haven't felt the effects of it as strongly as others, this is something that, anybody looking at any kind of form that mentions 2020, straight away they'll think, oh, that was COVID year, we think, today, obviously in the UK, we came out of lockdown. So we hope we're near the end of that, but it still, continues in some form. So I think people shouldn't resign themselves to thinking lockdown's finished and I did nothing. There's still, weeks and months ahead of new ways of working and I suppose digital ways of working. So what I would say to people is, one, don't worry about a gap on a CV for a number of reasons. So my advice comes to you as an early careers recruiter, but also as somebody who's worked in a commercial agency as well and who has that experience. Luckily at Atkins, and you'll find that many graduate schemes, they don't actually accept CVs. So that's the first thing why you shouldn't worry about a gap on a CV, because you won't have to present one to certain kinds of jobs. And on the other hand, then if you think about the maybe softer skills that you've developed over the past few months, that you've things that you've gone through, I always ask people to look back about their experiences. So you're not just a job and a job title on a piece of paper. You're a real person with real life experiences. So find a way to turn any of those negatives into a positive. Tap into, maybe the work that you did around a family caring commitment, a hobby that suddenly had to go online, research that you did yourself, or finishing off your studies in a lockdown situation. There's actually many positives that you might not realize right now, what you've gone through and how you've managed to get to where you are today. So you just need to find them and polish them up, and that's where you'll put them on your CV.
Thank you so much, Neve. And for those of you out there who are watching this, and like as Neve says, soft skills are really an important thing, and they're very easy to develop in lockdown. Even taking part in this webinar, I took part in webinars to improve my employability. It's something that you can get down there. It's something you can show you've been using your time constructively. So don't forget that. Sarah, how about you? What would be your first advice to someone talking about the CV gap?
Yeah, I think just what both Jamie and Neve have said. You shouldn't be worried about it. This has happened to everybody. Everybody is going to be in the same boat. You're not going to be the only person with this gap on your CV. It is going to be very common, and everybody knows exactly the reason why. So I really wouldn't worry about it. I mean, just to echo what everybody said, think about the things that you have done. So I had a little bit of a gap myself, in terms of a contract ended and I was interviewing, and then COVID hit. And so I personally was like, all I did, like a lockdown cliche, was make sourdough bread and read. I make a lot of bread now. But do you know, the thing that sourdough bread has taught me is around actually letting it go when it doesn't work out. So I won't bore you with the details, but you can kind of do everything right, bung it in the oven, and it comes out a mess. And I was like heartbroken. I was like, I'm never baking again. But eventually I'm like, right, bung it in the bin, we go again. So even if you think there's nothing, there will be something that you can talk about. So maybe it's about, for you, maybe you have really struggled, and that's okay. I think it's been difficult for a lot of people, but maybe think about, what did you do? Maybe you learned how important routine was for you, or how important it was for you to get your daily walk every day, and how you would continue to kind of fit those attributes into the working life. How maybe you've learned more about your work schedule and when you're more productive. I actually found, trying to having a very open schedule, how do you kind of build that to kind of fill a day and keep yourself kind of healthy, happy and occupied. And maybe that's taught you something about the peak hours that you thrive in when you work, and how you now try and build your work day around those things. There will be things, if you kind of sit and think and reflect, there will certainly be things to talk about.
Thank you very much. And it's funny, that's not the first time that sourdough bread has come up when we've been doing webinars during lockdown. But it's actually, it's one that I think is an interesting example, because I was reading articles about it before, and I've mentioned this in webinars before. There is something about a project that you start and finish inside of a day, that requires actual research, because for a lot of this, there's some really people written books on this, like how to feed it and nurture it and sing to it and everything else. It becomes like, actually, if you can articulate the amount of work you've put into that, and into structuring it, and into getting a project that keeps your well-being as well, it keeps your well-being up. Not only are you feeding yourself, you're doing something constructive, and you're finishing it in a day. It's actually a very good example, I think, to use as something that you can get through in lockdown. I'm going to switch up the order here a little bit, and I'm going to start with Sarah this time. But I think the thing we should talk about just a little bit, to provide some context, is how coronavirus and how the associated lockdown has impacted on the way that businesses have recruited this year. So maybe you could share some of your experiences. I mean, you've been onboarded virtually. That's a great place to start. Like, it's a really interesting time. So Sarah, I'll leave you to take it away.
Yeah, sure. I think obviously businesses had to react very quickly to get their workforces at home. For maybe companies that didn't have lots of people working at home previously, that was the first challenge. How do we get everybody home, online, working and well? And then continuing to hire. Deutsche Bank hired me, and I started in September September, and we're continuing to hire. So we were able to quickly move. The team worked very hard and did a phenomenal job to still run all of our programs that we had planned. So we still ran our spring program, interns and grads, and did it virtually. And the same with now. We are still hiring. We are still holding assessment centres. We are still doing all of that. But we are doing it all virtually, and that's, that's kind of the only choice we have right now. I'm sure when everything returns to pre-COVID life, we would love to be meeting candidates face to face. But we've continued to hire and continue to do what we need. Early careers talent is such a big part of our kind of talent strategy that we have adapted to ensure that we can still do it. So I would say that's the first thing. I would say it's something people are very conscious of. We're very conscious of, like, when we've moved our interviews online, to make sure we know that it's a new experience for people. We know that there could be technical difficulties. We could have technical difficulties on our side. The candidates can have technical difficulties. It's something everybody's aware of and conscious of. So it's not kind of an added hindrance. I would say onboarding virtually, my IT, I was actually very impressed. I was like, oh, it's my first week and it's virtual, I'll be doing nothing. I was logged on by 11 a.m. And good to go. So they'd really got that in place. And again, I think it's just something everybody is so conscious of, especially, for example, our team, they're so conscious of, have you gone out for a walk today? It's getting dark now. Take that walk at lunchtime. We're all like sending pictures from our walks of, like, yes, I left the flat today. And, making that extra effort to make people feel welcome and part of the team, especially when you haven't met. Turning our cameras on, so you can actually see people. Things like that do make a difference. You kind of get used to being on camera, and we do like coffee catch-ups. So we do like virtual coffee catch-ups, which would be like, if you're in the office going to get a drink and things like that. So I think it's definitely interesting. I think, the things that you don't pick up on, I think you learn a lot from being sat next to people and just overhearing conversations and getting a better idea of what everybody else is working on. I think that you miss slightly, but it's easily compensated for by just putting catch-ups in with people. And we do like little quizzes and things like that to try and make sure there's still some element of social interaction. So I hope I've answered your question. I feel like I may have gone off on a tangent.
No, I think that's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much, because people do forget. We keep saying everybody's in the same situation, everybody's adapting. Your colleagues still want to speak to you, and people are since March there were maybe a couple of months where things were a little bit difficult, everybody adapting. But now that all the systems are kind of in place, you are seeing people do care. They will contact you. You do have these team meetups and things are going on. Never underestimate the power once all this stuff is now in place. Of how it is, and everybody is still hiring as well, or a lot of people are still, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people are still hiring, and that's something we also forget. But we wouldn't be doing these webinars with people talking about hiring and hiring graduates if they weren't doing that themselves. I just want to drop a little note to there are quite a lot of questions coming in. I just want to say thank you very much for putting questions forward to begin with. We will get to them at the end. We will try to get to as many as possible. In the meantime, please do upvote the ones that you want answered if they're already in that list, so that we get them in priority order. Thank you again for submitting them. Neve, how about the impact of coronavirus and lockdown on hiring for you? How have things changed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a business that hasn't seen the impact. So again, it's very much we're all in this together. At Atkins, it has to be said, we have 4 core values. They're safety, collaboration, integrity, and innovation. So, when COVID happened, safety being one of our biggest core values, it was really important that we made sure we could onboard and get people started in the business in the safest way for them. So this is not just about physical safety, but also mental health, also awareness and safety around that. So, there was dates pushed back for people starting, but that was to ensure that they could get the full level of support they needed to come into the business. Similarly to what Sarah was saying, we have a really, really strong graduate community, very strong program, which really looks after the graduate holistically. So everybody's assigned their buddies, and you have your tea breaks. You know, you can imagine you're maybe just at the water cooler in the office talking. Well, you just do that at home instead. And team lunches, quizzes. The graduate community was amazing in coming together, and you know, still getting together to onboard people, you know, in the best way to make sure they got that kind of feel for the social element of it, because that is a really important part of a graduate scheme as well. You know, we're really lucky because Atkins had such an agile and flexible working environment anyway. I was used to working from home a few days a week. So, you know, we had over 10,000 employees working from home at the drop of a hat, and we were really, really lucky in that way that we could do that because of the way that we were set up. So that was really good. Also, you know, our UK CEO is so committed to our early careers community and to ensuring that we're still recruiting. So, you know, we're really lucky that we're recruiting across all of our early careers programs this year, including apprenticeships, you know, your placements and your graduates. And I think we'll have over 400 roles. So it's still a very busy year for us. We've just had to move digitally with that, but that really helps because we had a digital agenda, and that's just accelerated that for us. So that was part of our innovation. And then the collaboration thing, when you're not in a room with somebody, it's even more important that you're working collaboratively with them. So, you know, we're utilizing all the usual things. You know, we do a lot of work on Teams. We still have Skype here and there. And yeah, we have our WhatsApp groups. So, you know, coronavirus definitely had an impact because it was so unforeseen and so unusual. But I think, you know, so many businesses have really just seen this as a new opportunity. And it's about that thing again on your CV. Try and take any negative that's happened and get the positive out of it. So what could have been a negative, I think we've been able to work with it.
Thank you very much. I like that as well, turning the negatives into the positives. I mean, you may not be able to have the same in-person social experience, but you can have it virtually. You're not going to spill your coffee on the boss on the first day. Like there are upsides to the virtual working kind of thing. Jamie, how about enterprise? How have you, you know, what sort of changes have you seen since lockdown and coronavirus with hiring?
Yeah, so yeah, it's been a really crazy sort of 8 months, and I can't believe that come March next year we'll be 12 months into the situation we found ourselves in. It's incredible how quickly time flies. But with that in mind, it's also incredible how quickly businesses, ours included, can show their agility and adjust. So, for example, there's lots of things I think businesses have kind of always wanted to do, but never really taken that really bold step to do. For example, like having a work from anywhere policy. And that's kind of what enterprise, and it sounds like Sarah and Neve, both organizations have adopted a similar kind of approach. And when the pandemic sort of struck, I mean, enterprise operates, we're a global organization, and we operate in over 162 countries. So we had to be really quick and agile in terms of the way we adjusted. So we brought in a work from anywhere strategy, which essentially for people that aren't based in our sort of neighborhood stores, so the head office and the support staff, and we brought in an idea where you should be able to work from wherever you need to work. That was done really quickly. It showed great agility, and it was great to be part of that, because I went from being a very traditional firm handshake, whites of the eyes, nice to meet you kind of person, to this online expert with all these amazing backdrops and amazing virtual animations, and it really transformed the way that I work personally. And it's been really quite liberating to be able to be super efficient and meet lots of different people from all around the UK and Europe in a very short space of time. And I think that's what we've all learned as a business, that you can work differently. Now, in terms of our recruitment, everything went on hold while we sort of figured out the uncertainty. And this is one of my top tips I give to people when I'm talking to them about preparing for any interview. Do your research, learn about the brand, learn about the company you're applying to, because we've innovated and moved into different business strands as an organization off the back of COVID. And while it's been detrimental to business short term, I think we'll probably come out stronger, and with a different view on certain sort of market sectors and certain initiatives. So if you go into an interview furnished with that information and those facts, they can create really good interview, what I call interview memorable moments, easy for me to say on a Wednesday afternoon, and it allows you to really engage with the recruiter or the person interviewing you, and you can really sort of show a broad depth of understanding about the business. So if you was preparing for Enterprise with us, an interview with Enterprise, and you learn a little bit about how diversified into new markets and develop new strategies, and we have a different way of working now, that'd be a great talking point. Pleased to report, sort of 6 to 8 months on, our recruitment has switched fully back on, and we anticipate we're going to hire the same volumes of graduate management trainees for 2021, and our 12-month industrial placement is also back open and live as of last week. So it's really exciting. It just fills me with joy to know we can actually offer some great opportunities to some wonderful students. In terms, just to echo what Sarah and Neve said, in terms of the way of working, go into it eyes wide open. It's actually quite fun doing all the virtual stuff. We've changed and adapted the way we hire people, same as Sarah's experience recently with her new start. We onboard people virtually now, and we make it as fun as we can, as enjoyable as we can. But what you'll find is, ourselves included as a company, a lot of organisations, they're sort of approaching things by way of having a buddy system or a mentoring system. So what you might find is that you get teamed up with a mentor within the business because we feel as though that's needed, maybe more so with the lack of interaction or the reduced amounts of interaction with management or with senior people in the business. So by being assigned a mentor, you can meet with them virtually, you can set up WhatsApp groups. And so I think taking advantage of those internal options that companies have, because it really can be beneficial in terms of developing yourself when you first start with an organisation. And then in conclusion to the question, it is different. But I think I'm touching some wood right now because it's been a crazy 6 months. But I think it's actually going to work out okay, and especially with the positive news about the vaccine this morning from Boris.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And there's some absolutely excellent advice in there. As you said, for any interview, when you're doing your research and your commercial awareness, everybody's documenting how they're adapting to this pandemic. And I'm sure Enterprise will have it on blogs or have it on the website somewhere, the new things that we're doing, and read up about it. Now is the perfect time. You have the time to sit down and read, use it, get your knowledge base up, get your research done, and apply that to your own understanding of the pandemic and finances and everything of how it's affecting businesses. And I hope that's reassured some of you that are watching as well, because if you're hiring the same volume of grads now, it's been a long road to get through this kind of the lockdown and the pandemic and everything, but it shows that people are getting back to normal. The jobs are out there. Don't give up on the job hunt at the moment. Okay, so I want to we'll switch direction again. And we'll ask a little bit about, let's say, I'm just conscious because we have an awful lot of questions coming in. What skills, we want specific examples of skills. We talked a little bit about soft skills and different projects, but what sort of skills could students have built without realizing during lockdown? If I start with Jamie this time, I'm sorry to keep you speaking, and we'll move on from there. So what skills do you think?
So it's interesting. One of the big things that I think people can really demonstrate from their period of lockdown or that gap in the CV that we're talking about this afternoon is that ability to demonstrate resilience. We have all had to be resilient. Now, being resilient, it's a real buzzword. People talk, oh, we want people that are really resilient and really adaptable and really hardworking. But what does that actually mean? And I think it's open to interpretation, but for me, again, we spoke about this already on this session. It's talking about what have you learned? What has this period of lockdown taught you? And being honest and showing the real person behind the CV is critical, because I've been keeping half an eye on some of the questions. I've not answered one of the questions, but I've noticed a little bit of theme in there, and people often get really sort of maybe anxious, quite concerned about how their CV will be perceived. But let's remember, the CV is only a gateway to the person, right? So we see a CV, we see an application form, and Neve made a really good point. We don't ask for CVs, we ask for application forms. And that's really just to ascertain whether or not you've got the core skills or the qualifications that we maybe need. People then come in, and then it's about really sort of expanding on all those points and showing those sort of skills and things that you learned about. So talking about things like what have you learned during lockdown? I've learned a lot about my personal brand. I've worked on getting my digital footprint absolutely perfect. So I've got a great LinkedIn profile. The social media and the posts that have been seen by people such as yourselves, Jamie, are things I want people to see. I've gone out and spent a lot of time learning about industry awareness. I've learned a lot about your company because I'm here for the interview, and I'm just talking now in third person as if I was in that situation. It really is just take some time, sit down, and actually make a list of what you did during lockdown. And I'm pretty much guarantee you'll be it sourdough, be it for myself building raised beds and growing vegetables. There'll be something in there that you can tailor to the person that you're interviewing with, or the organisation that you're applying to.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And if you're out there watching this, we do have an article on TARGETjobs about filling the 2020 CV gap. And as Jamie was saying, it can be anything. I think one of the examples we gave on there was someone who was reading a lot of books in lockdown, and it doesn't sound like it, that's not the, you think, oh, I can't put that on the CV. The example that our writer gave was, they'd started reading the Discworld series of books, which is a huge series of books by Terry Pratchett. Is a sort of one of the best-selling British adult authors in the UK, I think, and they got this far. So they would they not only sat there and read the books, which is one thing in itself. They'd also documented that they'd gotten this far along, and they kind of got a structured approach to it. And they were trying to use that to say, look, I have planned this out. This is something I know I have a lot of time, and there's a little bit of planning skills in there. There's a little bit of probably research skills in there. Try to leverage what you've done, whatever it is, in some way if you can. I think is just really, really good advice. Neve, what would you say about lockdown skills that we might have sort of obtained without knowing it?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I couldn't boil an egg 9 months ago, and now I'm like, oh, will I go on MasterChef? I've had a good few months, but no, there's so many things that people have probably taken part in, and maybe you just haven't realized that it was a learning opportunity, and it's something that will really stand to you. So, even an event like this, the fact that you took part in it and you're trying to research the market and trying to improve your job prospects. So, virtual networking, skills sessions, soft skills are going to be so important because, a number of you might have actually finished off your qualifications this year. That's something to be really proud of, and to make a note of how you managed to do that, in a virtual world. So I would say to people, still keep an eye out there for free e-careers opportunities, because often they don't have a cost associated, which means that they really are available for all. Not everything that you've learned or that you've done the last few months has to relate in a really technical way to the role that you want to do, so you don't have to think to yourself, well, I'm a mechanical engineer, but what did I do mechanical engineering wise the last 9 months? It doesn't have to be like that. So, soft skills are just as important in helping you get on in the working world and in helping you secure that role. So I really think outside the box, think of what you've done. And, extracurricular soft skills, they're just as important as anything technical that you would have done. But there's going to be so many things that you just need to really think back. How has this changed me as a person and how I approach things, or how has this helped my job search? And you will have those examples.
Thank you very much, Neve. And I'm trying to think of examples in between as well of things that you've probably done at home but don't actually think of. And I remember listening to a podcast a while back, and they interviewed the mum of a pro gamer. And like she was saying, he's not leveraging it properly for his CV. He's organizing tournaments with people in 5 different countries. He's communicating in at least 2 or 3 different languages. Why hasn't he put this on his CV? And it just sort of resonated. I thought, well, there's a lot of people who are going to be doing that at home now. So, try, if you're out there and you're not sure, think about what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're doing it, and try to leverage it. I think that's really good advice. Sarah, how about you? What skills would we recommend?
No, so I would just, again, add, very similar. Think about what you've done, start writing notes. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys got sucked in to lots of Zoom quizzes with your friendship groups. I personally am glad they suddenly stopped at some point in. But you know, maybe you were organising those. Maybe you realised actually the types of questions that got the group more engaged rather than, I don't know, other types of questions. Maybe you have spent your time growing your network on LinkedIn and you've realised the type of message that gets a response versus the type of message that doesn't. And then maybe you can tie that into kind of client service and how you've realised, you know, what that's taught you between like your length of message, or you can just be really thought about it. No experience is a wasted experience if you think about it and reflect on it. And the saying goes, if you're not winning, you're growing. So if you don't feel like you have kind of achieved much, you would have been growing and developing in some way. So I think it will be there. I would say just start jotting things down and you will find things to talk about. Like I was like, oh, I've just made a lot of bread, but actually break that down. What did that involve? What did it teach me? What did I learn? I read loads of books. What was the most interesting book that I read? How did I fit them in? Anything. There will be so much you can talk about. And if you have done, I did one course of the art of like happiness or something. I mean, look how happy I am. Yeah. You know, if you've done free online courses, add them. But you know, that's reflecting on them will give you something to talk about. So not just like, oh, well, I did this course on like the science of happiness because it was free and filled a couple of hours. Think about, okay, well, actually, how did you find the online learning experience? Is that a learning technique that works for you? What, you know, can you put any of those techniques into your everyday life? That kind of thing. There will be things you can put down. I think just think about it.
Thank you, Sarah. And this segues quite nicely into what I think is going to be our final talking point, which is now we've identified ways that you can go away and think about the skills you might have learned. Is how do we present them on a CV, and how are we going to present them in an application when we move into 2021? So Sarah, I'm going to start off with you this time. So we'll go back around the circle, and then we'll open up to some questions. So how is best to present it? Do we need to mention coronavirus? Do we need to mention lockdown and social distancing and everything? Or are we going to be so tired of that by next year?
I'm tired of it already. No. I think it really depends. I think it depends how you've spent your time and what you've done on how the best way is to present that. So I guess what I mean by that is if you have done kind of some virtual insight events, virtual things like that, you may have been able to attend some of these things that pivoted, then maybe put them down under the work experience, explain that they were virtual, you know, shows you that you're able to adapt to a virtual environment. If you've done online courses, then you might want to add them to kind of like a skills section. If it's like sourdough bread, you might just want to put it down as a hobby. So I think it depends what you've done on how best to display and relevant. But also, as Jamie mentioned, your CV is just the gateway to hopefully meeting somebody. So then you can talk about it. So I think it depends kind of how you filled your time as how best to slot it into a CV if you've got things that you've done that you could add. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I mean, I think it like as you're saying with online courses as well, it's not just where it goes on the CV. So you could put it under hobbies, you could put it under other things I've done. If that course is particularly relevant to that employer, you might want to include that higher up on your CV. You might want to make that more stand out more. Neve, how about what would you expect to see? Because you're probably going to be taking CVs and things, aren't you? So what would you expect to see next year?
I have to say, that's the perfect advice. It really depends on what your experience has been, where you put that. So again, I mean, if you've had any of those, virtual work experiences, that should be under your work experience. And then the extracurricular or softer skills, again, you can add that into key skills or hobbies. The one thing I would say I remember from being a commercial recruiter, and it's true, finding a job is a full-time job in and of itself. So don't panic about having to put down a lump of time on your CV where you say, September to January job seeking. But you can go into a bit more detail. So you could add the steps you took to make successful applications, how you analysed where you were applying to, or what kind of applications you were making. So you can kind of expand a bit and show maybe some of the cross-transferable skills in that place. In terms of applications, then, I mean, so if you don't have a CV, a lot of places that would have an early careers program, I suppose, don't take a traditional CV because we understand that you might not have a traditional CV at this stage in your career. So, you know, they might ask you questions around what you think your key skills developed are, and that's where you could expand upon this similar kind of topic. You could make reference, you know, unfortunately, I didn't secure a placement role or a job once I left university. However, through trying to find a new role, I developed these skills, or I did X, Y, Z. So there's definitely a place where you can make reference to it, and really don't sell yourself short. You know, we've all made it this far through the lockdown and through everything, so you should be really proud of that, and the fact that so many of you would have actually finished your studies in quite harsh times. So make sure you really sell, again, as Jamie was saying, the resilience angle is so important. Make sure you're selling all those cross transferable skills, whether it's on a CV or an application form.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to make a little mention that we do have articles on TARGETjobs about the STAR method, and about strengths-based interview questions, competency-based application questions. Do go and have a look at those, because if you're not doing a CV, it may be an application form, and you may need to answer those sorts of questions. Jamie, how about you? What would you expect to see on CVs in 2021 relating to coronavirus skills?
Yeah, so very similar to Neve and Sarah. So we because we're looking for, majority of our recruitment's done with sort of early career graduates or just graduated employees or potential employees. So we rely on application forms. So I think the key tip I give to people is don't be fooled by an application form. An actual application form is essentially a CV. And I think people, when they see an application form, it's almost like lures them into a false sense of security that, hey, I've just spent 5 weeks writing the best CV in the world. I'm going to spend 10 minutes writing this application form. So have your CV open next to you. If you've got a luxury of a dual screen, fantastic. If not, print it off if you can, and try and translate the same quality and accuracy from that CV into application form. Because the application form, it is the gateway into you as a potential candidate and employee. And again, I spoke about it in one of my previous responses to one of the questions. And it's all during an interview, it's about creating those interview memorable moments, those moments of memory when the recruiter remembers you as a candidate because you engaged with them and gave them something really interesting. So you kind of almost want to create a little trail in this sort of application form or CV where there's some real memorable points and some poignantly written, interesting insights into you as a person, which are concise, that give enough away to create interest, but not too much that the recruiter reads it and feel like they've already potentially met you. So it's about just creating that little sort of interest that I'll take a look at application form, like, do you know what, this person sounds really interesting. Look at all the wonderful things they've done during lockdown. They've developed their resilience, their commercial awareness, they've done X, Y, and Z, they've baked bread, grown vegetables, you name it, they've done it. And that really would then be enticing to somebody, and that would maybe want that person would then want to progress that application further to that face-to-face interview. So yeah, that would be my sort of take on it, Matt.
Thank you very much. And that's something we've had that this came up at a pupillage fair, which is for aspiring barristers. And obviously all the students have straight A's and everything else, but that finding something that gets you a hook in, because when everybody's got very high academic grades and it's all very competitive, you need something. And the one that came up was gin tasting. One of the barristers said, I remember this guy because he had on his CV that he was a professional gin taster, and that stuck with him. And obviously he would have been asked about that interview, and it's just something interesting that gets your foot in the door. Yeah, absolutely, really agree with what you said. I want to move on to questions because we've got quite a few here. The first two I'm going to actually combine together because this is about online courses, and it's obviously what everybody's thinking about while they're at home. I'm going to open this up to the panel, so please do just feel free to chip in at will. So the first question, the first part of this question is, what are some recognized online courses that students can do while searching for jobs? And it would be interesting if you have any that your organizations would specifically look out for, I think, as well. So who would like to go? Sorry.
I'll happily open on that one. So, I mean, not necessarily like online courses, more these sort of extracurricular sort of webinars and sessions, like for example, and not just saying it because I'm on this one, but like there's certain professional bodies which are recognised. So anything that's run through the larger platforms that are industry recognised would be really good. So TARGETjobs obviously is synonymous with great graduate recruitment and graduate support. So we'd love to hear if you've done something like this. So all the brands are available, but it really is, again, it's about positioning exactly what you've done, because it might not be recognised, it might not be something I've ever heard of, but that might be really interesting to me because you found some obscure course or self-help online module that actually I'd like to know about myself. So I think for me, it's more about how you explain that and how you get that across either in written or verbal form.
Neve, Sarah, sorry.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, at Atkins, because we take such a wide variety of backgrounds and disciplines and studies, there's not necessarily, if you do course X, Y, and Z, you know, that's perfect, you're A star. So yeah, I would say if you have a particular technical specialism, you could look towards the professional body and see if they've been running online courses. But everything you do is going to be individual to you, or what you get from it will be individual to you. So I wouldn't worry too much about the prestige or paying for an online course or feeling like you have to have done courses through certain companies, as long as you can explain how that course actually helped you develop. And again, if it's related to, you know, your technical specialism, definitely mention it.
Thank you, Sarah. Would you say the same, or are there specific ones that perhaps Deutsche Bank look for in terms of finance?
No, not specific ones. I would say, you know, it depends on your passion and what you're interested in. So if you have a topic that you're really passionate and interested in, you know, and you can find some free courses, do them. You know, what could be useful for those that haven't done, if you're interested in our kind of finance, investment banking divisions, and you're not from a financial background, it could be useful to start building that knowledge. So start, are there podcasts that you can listen to? Are there, you know, courses that you can go on? We have a website called The Unofficial Guide to Banking, and it teaches you all about investment banking and what the different divisions do. Or it could be that you start, if you're interested in the kind of, you know, again, the investment banking side, you know, you might be particularly interested in health and fitness. So you start following a stock in that and seeing how it's affected by the markets. Or you know, start, we talk about commercial awareness, make sure that you're starting to read the news, you understand what's going on in the news, you're able to kind of have a view on it. These will help you in your interviews to kind of, you know, have an idea of what's going on in the world and not be able to regurgitate like, yes, I definitely keep up with the news, but have an opinion, you know, how is it going to affect the business area that you're potentially interested in? And I think that's relevant for all of us. To kind of start keeping an eye on what's going on in the world and how it might affect businesses. And it's a really easy exercise to do. Pick one of our companies today, grab a newspaper and go through and say, what do you think would be relevant or interesting for either three of the companies that I met today? And just kind of start honing those skills of going through and picking them out. That's my advice.
Thank you. That's the kind of off of the sort of recognized, you know, sort of the training websites that have become sort of ubiquitous now that we're in lockdown. I just want to address one question very quickly, just to reiterate, because I think we have already answered this before, which is where on my CV should I include online courses that I've done or I'm currently doing? We have covered this, and I think what the answer the conclusion that we came to was it goes basically where it is most relevant. If it is a professionally recognized qualification, you would put it as a professionally recognized qualification as you would education. If it's extracurricular and it's more your softer skills, it would go there. And if it's really sort of out there, it could be in hobbies or a whole new section. I just wanted to, because I think we've covered that already. So the next one we have on the list, and this is quite an interesting one. So please, we'll see if we get any differing views here. Can 2020 graduates expect some sort of leniency from recruiters, considering the fact that we are COVID grads, in quotation marks?
What does leniency mean, and in what context? I'd like to know a bit more about that, I suppose, before answering.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
anyway, we can't reach out at the limitations of the webinar.
I don't know. I suppose I don't know the intention of the question, but I don't think it's a thing of leniency or not. I mean, we're not judging people because they graduated during COVID, or we're not saying, oh, they never had any work experience during COVID. I mean, that's not how it works. You know, particularly I think when you go through an application system, which will ask you very specific questions and give you plenty of opportunity to really show off your skills. I don't think you'd need leniency because you're not being judged harshly for what has been a global event. So I don't think I understand the question fully, but to me, it shows me that the person who wrote it is maybe quite anxious, or they're projecting their own fears of the year. And I would just say, you know, we've all gone through something quite unexpected, and this will have made people, this will have really shown them who they are and what they want to do and what their strengths are. So take every positive you can from a really quite negative situation which we've had, and go forward in positivity. I wouldn't be panicking, and I wouldn't be even thinking, oh, I need to look for leniency, because you're going to have great skills. Just because you graduated 2020 doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or that you've done anything wrong. So that's how I'd answer that one.
I think, yes, certainly there is a level of anxiety there. And I mean, I think perhaps leniency here could be interpreted in, if my CV is a little bit emptier than perhaps the year before's entrance, maybe would it be considered strange? But I think, as we've been talking about all the time here, no, it's about the skills that you have and how you articulate them. And everybody is in this situation. The world is in this situation, not just a sort of set of universities in the UK. Okay, so we've got a very, very broad one here. Which is the best way to enter a career internship or early graduate career? Is there a best way? Does anybody have a suggestion?
I don't think there's necessarily a best way. I think it's a great idea to do a year in industry or an internship, or just to gain that professional experience. So if the question is it a good idea? I think it's a great idea, and it's something that we find very desirable. Is we find that people that have done any form of sort of placement, be it paid or voluntary, in any organisation, regardless of time, those candidates tend to be really well-rounded and have a lot to talk about. So it's very desirable quality to find in somebody that's done that. And then I think in terms of best way, I think maybe looking at something. I speak to a lot of people that are quite specific about, I want to do X, Y, and Z. This is the job I want. But often they'll go away and do like a more broader sort of provision of experience, and they come away from that and they're like, do you know what, I did want to do that, but I found out I'm really good at this, and that might actually be better for me now. So again, I think it can really help you develop as a person.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Knowing what you don't want to do is just as important sometimes as what you do want to do. We've got a couple of CV questions, and these, I'm just trying to keep an eye. Apologies for my eyes flicking away reading the question feed. So, should CVs be descriptive and detailed, or short and brief? And this is somewhat of an assumption, as recruiters on average look at an applicant's CV for 6 seconds. I'm not sure that's backed by science. And there was another question as well: should they be 1 page if you have a lot of experience?
I was going to say 6 seconds. Oh, I can't even read a packet of soup in 6 seconds, so I don't know about a CV. I mean, from my experience with reading a CV, and I suppose it depends where you are in your career and the kind of role. So, for example, if you're going for a really specific, maybe marketing, role, you might want to really make sure your CV looks good or looks innovative or original, or if you're going for a design role, or you could make it related to that. Depending on your level of experience, your CV length can fluctuate. So I would say, I've hired CEO level roles before where somebody's had 40 years experience. They still got their CV on 2 pages. I don't think there's much of a need to go over that amount. I think if you have a really good writing style and you can be succinct, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to get your CV into 1 or 2 pages and still be able to explain, you know, what you've done, or, you know, I suppose have that opener so that you can be asked in further detail further down the line in an interview.
Sorry.
I think the danger with the question that's just been posed is it's quite a personal response, depending on the recruiter you are and the company you work for. Because I'd hate for someone to be steered by the advice that we give. And the main advice that I give anybody about a CV application form is don't have the same one for every job. If you just sit there and apply for 10 jobs and send the same CV off, you're probably going to struggle, because you do need to tailor it to the job you're applying for and the company you're applying to. And I think, like, without sort of committing to a more sort of like direct response, I think that is the best advice I would give.
Do we feel, because there are a couple of other CV focused questions, and I'm going to try and roll them a little bit together because we're quite tight on time. You know, is there a limit of when you should cut off your experience? Because obviously we may be talking about people who have graduated a little bit later or have attended university later than what we've come to see as traditional. Should there be a cut-off point? Is it, someone's asking, is it 2.5 years, 5 years? You know, should you ever cut off experience, or how should we prioritize it?
I think it depends as we talked about, if you're tailoring your CV to the company and the role, then you might change what's included. So it might be that actually this thing that you did, so for example, I did bar work throughout university. When I was applying freshly out of university, it was on my CV. That is no longer on my CV. I've been working at early careers for however long, 9 years, whatever, 10 years. That's not relevant anymore. So I think it's about picking out the bits that are still really relevant and tailoring that. So if I was maybe to go back to kind of, you know, more that client service, maybe I would add that bit back in. So I think it's about thinking about the role, the skills that they need, and kind of how you highlight that depending on your experience and tailoring it that way. So if you are just doing a 1-page CV, you've only got that 1 page. So therefore you are going to have to potentially, depending on your experience, prioritize, and, you know, reduce the amount of things you say about one thing. If, for example, if you did just a short work experience, you probably don't want to spend a whole page talking about it if it was like a day's insight event or something. So, you know, be mindful about kind of what you gained from it, how long it was, to how much time on that 1-page real estate you want to add to it. But if you're telling them to every role, then you will be kind of adapting maybe what you put on if you have got lots of experience.
Thank you. I think that's really that's absolutely perfect. It's so brutal, because you feel like everything I've done is really important and they need to know everything, because otherwise it might not get me the job. But you do have to be, you know, really concise. You have to keep it down. You have to prioritize. You have to order it in exactly the right way. And it's a tough job. As we've said, job hunting is a job. I just want to get through one very last quick question. And this is an interesting one. And how would you go about quantifying what you have done at a job on your CV if you don't have metrics to measure what was done? I'm gonna open it up and see who would like to respond.
I'm not sure you necessarily need to quantify in too much detail in written format at that application stage. I think a concise description of your key responsibilities and roles in the job or position that you held would then lead nicely into a verbal conversation where you would very easily be able to articulate exactly what you did. So I think it's about giving away enough to get through to the next stage, but not giving away too much that it then becomes too wordy and off-putting, perhaps. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a really good bit of advice, because you can have those further conversations where you can use your STAR method to pick out maybe examples of what happened, to explain a difficult time that you had at the job, or a challenge, or how you overcame something. So there is ways that you can show, I suppose, the quality of what you did, even if you weren't necessarily working to like a KPI or something like that. I was just going to say, just before it cuts us off or gets rid of us, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm always very open if anybody would like to reach out on LinkedIn. if there's any questions we didn't get to answer today, or if anybody's interested in any of the programs or the companies, I'd just like to let everybody know I'm very happy to, talk to you later on LinkedIn if you need.
I think that's a good moment to call time and say, right, we should probably start to wrap this up. I think we just have the opportunity, if you do want to, I'll ask each one of the panel if you have a website that you would like to direct people to, or if you are open to being contacted on LinkedIn, please do feel free to say so. Sarah, if we can start with you, we'll go around the counterclockwise this time. Please tell people where they can find out more.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Sarah Scadding. That's how you'll find me on LinkedIn if you wish to do so. The website is db.com/careers, and then you will find our early careers section, and that's got lots of useful information and all of our open opportunities.
Thank you very much. And Neve?
Yeah, so I'm Neve Fitzgerald. My name's a bit long, so maybe look in the chat pane. I've written it down just in case nobody knows how to spell it. And please do reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And if you just want to go to Google, type in Atkins Global Graduate Careers, you'll see all our early careers site. We've got really great resources there, so you can find out as much as possible about us.
And Jamie?
Yeah, I'm Jamie Wolf, as it's spelt on the screen. Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. More than happy to talk. Also, as well, if you look on our website, it's Enterprise Careers. I'm actually listed on there as one of the recruiters, so you can contact myself directly just by clicking on there. And that's careers.enterprise.co.uk.
That's fantastic. A very big thank you to each of our panel for joining us for this webinar today, and a big thank you to all of you out there who are watching. That's goodbye from us. So you will find more webinars on Target Jobs in future, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for all the questions. Bye.